Welcome to the Legacymakers podcast. At Legacymakers, we believe that family is the foundation of society. And if you can change a family, you will change the world. The Legacymakers podcast is dedicated to bringing you relative, inspiring, and educational content to help you build and leave the legacy you intend to leave. If this episode encourages you or inspires you in any way, please consider making a tax-deductible donation at www.chooseourlegacy.com. Thanks and enjoy the show. Hey. Well, welcome back, everybody. So thankful you guys decided to tune in today. We're coming back. It's mid-February, and it's been a bit since we've actually had a show. And so this is super exciting. And this is cool because it's actually a little bit of a continuation of our last show where we had Dr. Andy Garrett here in-house today, or last time, and he's back today, should I say. And so we're super excited to continue the conversation just around family psychology, and just hear all the great wisdom that Andy has and has experienced and has learned over just the course of his career. And so thank you guys again for just jumping in. Thanks for being here. It's going to be a great time. Today's topic, though, is I was a little bit piqued when I heard about it and started processing it. And it's all about social comparison and really how that relates to our family and what we experience in our family, but really the psychology of social comparison, the psychological impacts of social comparison and how that affects our life in family. And so that is the topic today, but let's just dive right in and just talk about what is social comparison. What is it? Maybe Andy, if you want to just chime in here and give us a little bit of an overview of what are we talking about here, that'd be awesome.
First off, I love that you're feeling peaked. That was great.
Yeah, feeling it.
So, interestingly, as I was doing a little prep work for this, was looking at the kind of theory of social comparison, and some of the original theory that came out was, I think, in the 1950s, Dr. Festinger, if I'm getting the name right. But he originally conceptualized it as a healthy thing, right? It was this idea that we all do this naturally, right? It happens even in childhood. And that it helps us to understand our place in the world, right? It helps to actually shape our sense of identity.
Oh, wow.
Now, I think, social media has taken the idea of social comparison and kind of put it on steroids. I would disagree, right? I don't think our sense of identity should come from comparing ourselves to other people. You know, there's kind of upward comparison and downward, right? So there's upward in the sense that we're comparing ourselves to people that are further along, that might be more successful than us, might be stronger than us, whatever those things are. And usually that tends to create feelings of insecurity, right? It can really create feelings of envy. It can be a lot of unhealthy things, unless you have a clear idea of why you're going into something trying to compare, right? Sometimes someone that's further along can be inspiring. But I think if you're mindlessly just kind of scrolling through, more often than not, it's a very unhealthy thing, right? And even when you're comparing yourself downward, so that you're saying, well, I'm further along, right? I'm more successful. I'm further along in these things. It creates a very short-term kind of benefit. So there might be a sense of like, hey, I'm feeling pretty great today, right? I'm much better than all these people. But it leaves kind of a constant never-ending, right? So that your sense of self-worth, your sense of identity is basically never set. You're constantly comparing yourself. So to me, I think it's a very unhealthy thing. We focus on what I help people with is to find their true north identity. And what I like about the concept of true north, I don't know if you guys are familiar with true north versus magnetic north.
Yeah,
right?
A little bit.
So magnetic north is actually, with a compass, it's never actually set. It's constantly reading the electromagnetic field of the environment of the Earth, right? And so it very rarely actually lines up with true north, which is a stable, fixed point. With faith, I think our true north should always be fixed. Yeah. It points directly to God. But, when our sense of identity is always kind of reading the environment, who am I in my group of friends? Who am I at church? Who am I at home? It creates almost a sense of moral relativism, right? That sense of, what is right and wrong? What do I do? Who am I? Am I good in this context? Am I better in that one? So I don't know if that all makes sense, but social comparison is essentially, when you really just, boil it down to its basis, it's just how you compare yourself. It's always you comparing yourself to other people.
Either upward or downward.
Yeah.
Fascinating. Doubling back to that metaphor of the magnetic north, is what you're saying, am I reading it right, that the true north makes sense to me? It's fixed upon God. The common Christian truism would be, I know who I am and whose I am. So you're declaring the identity piece and an ownership piece, that you're, son or daughter of God. So that part's clear, but is the magnetic side, meaning like that we lose the north based on all these other people groups, essentially? Like it's liable or it's probable to bounce around.
May not be, a perfect kind of comparison.
No,
right?
no, I like it.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure I got it.
Well, I'm sure there are some people out there that are like hikers or, that really, and they might be like, well, magnetic north is amazing. But yeah, I think in this comparison, right, it is the idea is that instead of just having a clear sense of, hey, I feel secure and settled in who I am, right? I'm constantly, everywhere I go, I'm looking to say, right, what is right and wrong? Who am I? Where's my value coming from, right? What makes me who I am? And so there's no kind of set sense of what makes you who you are. So who you are, you kind of compartmentalize in that regard, right? Yeah. You see this, I think, with a lot of people, that they're one person at church on Sunday, they're a different person at home, and it's really tiring. I think it's a really bad way to try and go about things, because you're constantly shifting, right? And I think it can lead to not only fatigue around identity, but it leads to people really getting way off course in certain areas of their life and justifying it in ways that I think can be very unhealthy.
Yeah, you could affect your whole no one of those often go together. If they're two big God-sized questions, destiny and identity, no wonder one leads to the other. I think that's a profound point.
Love that.
The other thing, I'm sure we're just jumping into interviewing Andy right now, because I think that's
I can love it.
So good right now.
Fantastic.
I was thinking about the fatigue thing, right as you said it. I thought that was so good. People losing their way.
Yeah.
And it being tiresome. Oh, I lost my question. But
well, my interjection is, the first thing that comes to mind as you're speaking about it is it reminds me that it's just a faulty foundation. Yeah. It's not secure by nature. Yep. Having comparison in general, or living in kind of that state, whether it's up or down. It feels like it's faulty, like it's going to crumble at some point.
Yeah, it can lead to, so I'm going to go ahead and jump into a personal example. Yeah. When I was younger, right, I didn't really have a clear sense of, where my worth or value came from. And I can remember a specific moment in high school. It was the first day, freshman year, went to a massive high school, like 4,000 students there. Oh, wow. I came from a tiny feeder school. And the friends that I did have from there, they all played football, and so they made friends that way. Yeah. I was 6'2" and weighed about 140 pounds. So I was like, I don't know, football's for me. I think I wore a tank top one day to school, and friends were like, don't do that again. That's not a good look. So I didn't do football. So first day, and there was like 3 lunches. It didn't happen to be that the lunch period I had wasn't with my friends, and so I had no one to sit with. And so I went to a group of strangers and asked if I could just sit with them, and they actually said no. This is taken. And I felt this sense of shame, right? And I remember thinking, I made an internal agreement with myself that day. I'm going to do whatever it takes to be liked, right? I'm going to do whatever it takes to become popular. So that essentially became my true north. But in that process, right, I got really good wherever social groups I was in, is kind of reading who do they need me to be in order for them to like me. And it was different, right? So I'd tell different stories. I'd be a different person, right? My personality would shift and change depending on what I thought people needed me to be. So I could be at a party, I certainly made it into that popular crowd, but I felt like the loneliest person in the room, right? Because I was always afraid at some point people are going to get together and they're going to share stories about, what I'm saying to them. I'm going to be exposed as a fraud. So is that sense, right, of social comparison and how this relates to that is, if you don't have a secure base for what makes you who you are, right? If there's not a foundation of that, it just creates a kind of this constant insecurity. Yeah. And you're going into each environment trying to figure things out. And I don't think that is a very solid foundation. So reinforcing back what you said, yes.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah, and it can create an identity crisis.
Yeah, exactly.
And trying to find who you are in different settings, like you're saying, I completely agree with. And you brought up the fact that people can put on oneself in church and oneself in different areas of their life. But I would have you consider that it might be one of the greatest threats to the Christian church is playing the part and playing Christianity, basically putting on perfection, not as a result of, hey, life looks good because it is good because I'm at the center of God's will, but that life looks good so that I can fit in here at church, and actually probably creating even more separation between those who God may be calling into that space and them not feeling like it's a space they can step into because their life doesn't look like that, but really that's the home for somebody to come who is in shambles and find that true foundation. But when we're putting on this front and this facade, there is no foundation there, right? There's just a gap between us and the foundation.
Yeah. And I think that's where you get sometimes the insincerity or the inauthenticity, right? Where whether someone putting on the act of who they think they should be, but there's not a sense of them really feeling bought in. And so a lot of times it can lead to them making very bad choices where their public life is very incongruent with their private life, right? And that usually doesn't tend to have great outcomes.
Yeah, I love Pete Scazzaro on that, and he's just saying what other guys have said in your line of work, Andy, but they use the word integration. That's a marker for health, is that your inside matches your outside.
Yeah.
Which is just such I think a good vein of conversation would be, and you could help us, Andy, is like, what are maybe some practical steps to reconcile those two? Like I could speak from my own experience of just the last 3 years as a 30-something, starting to mine just deeper and deeper into that inner self. I mean, it's an endless pit, man. I mean, of stuff I wasn't honest about, stuff I never looked at before, I tucked away. He would call that your authentic self when you finally get to that integrated whole. But what a lifelong journey to do it. What are some of the steps that you see people take as they do that journey?
I think sometimes the initial step, right, is just taking inventory of where things are at. How did I get here, right? Sometimes before you can kind of pivot to something new, you need to be able to let go of the old, right? Kind of relates back to, I think, our last topic. Yeah. Sometimes you need to forgive. Sometimes you need to let go, right? Sometimes you need to do that. I'll have sometimes clients do what we call a family genogram. I don't know. Are you guys familiar with those?
Not really.
I think you do something similar to this in the legacy
you talk about
making.
Family of like looking back at your
family. So you do like 3 generations usually, right? So you do kind of your parents, your grandparents, and sometimes if the great grandparents. And so you have like usually a square is the man, the circle is the female. You can mix that up if you want.
You can do it.
But and you're looking at family patterns, right? So you're saying that my grandpa, he maybe health issues. He struggled with, whatever. These are the great strengths he brought. This is the impact he had. And it's amazing how in going that you can really see family patterns and you start to see the legacy that's been passed down to you, right?
Exactly.
And so I love in doing that, right, helping then to say, all right, so this is the legacy. This is the sense of identity that has been passed to you.
Wow.
Right here is a pivotal moment. What is it that you want to continue to carry forward? And what is it that right now you want to leave behind, right? If you're looking at the ripple effect you're creating going forward, how do you want to change the legacy, right? This is where I think your work is so amazing. But sometimes I think that's an important thing, is needing to accept wherever you're at or however you got there. And that kind of breaks the rigidity to sometimes, wherever you're at with identity.
Yeah. And
then from there, I think it starts to focus on, all right, I've got some element of closure on the past. Sometimes you need to do deep work and some therapy on that. Sometimes it doesn't require that, right? Oftentimes, I don't think it necessarily does, but let me make sure.
A theme that's come up recently is generational trauma, which kind of talks about things that what you're speaking to, and I think one way to overcome that is through that keyword authenticity, right? Who's your authentic self, and which leads to true awareness and clarity, right? And then, right? And so when we're able to step into that and cultivate a place where people can be their authentic self and truly see where they're at, then it's not like it's enablement in any way. It's actually higher level accountability, because now it's really the cards are on the table, right? And then it kind of shares this, brings this verse to my mind, which is change your hearts and show by the way you live that you have changed. Right, so it's like, how do we change our hearts if we don't realize there's a heart issue in the first place?
That's good, powerful verse.
The integration between kind of head and heart. The psychology program I went to, Azusa Pacific University, I was looking for an integration program. I don't remember if I said this last time, but there's different models of integration between psychology and theology, right? Some have you get a master's in divinity and then a doctorate in psychology and just kind of figure out where the intersection is. what I liked about APU is they said where psychology and theology come together is in your moral formation, right? In the values. Yeah. That's where the practical reality is. And so that really helped me to create, coming out of grad school, a clear sense of, hey, I can help people spiritually, right? By helping them to get clear on their values and how to live in alignment with that so that you are creating kind of that integration, right? Between, your faith, your heart, your head. And when you do, it's amazing what happens, right? When people start to live in alignment with their values. And I think it is the most powerful antidote to the social comparison, right? The more secure you feel that you are, and what you know to be important to you, so that instead of getting caught up in looking at comparing myself to the Joneses and saying, well, I don't have as nice a car and their grass looks greener, or, Orange County, not everybody has lawns, but right. Instead you recognize this stuff doesn't matter, right? The more I'm focused on the things that I know that really matter, I feel strong. There's a sense of internal security that I'm focused on. And so it helps to alleviate or eliminate the need or desire. I think a lot of what causes social comparison is a sense of self-uncertainty, right? The more uncertain we feel, we start looking outside ourselves to try and figure out who are we? Where do we fit in the pecking order?
Dang.
But if we feel more secure in that, then a lot of times we don't feel the need. We feel almost like safe, within ourselves. And so.
Absolutely. That's interesting. That's deep right there. That takes some processing to really think about. But what I'm hearing is, it kind of is you're leading to almost like a step in how you can approach your maybe tendency towards comparison. What you're saying is to learn how to be secure and identify like what you value and who you are and attain security in that.
Yeah.
First, right? I was on so kind of to our next question, it was like, what causes it? Which you kind of mentioned, it's kind of just the psychological, natural development of our brains. But maybe you can expand on that. But I was on my coaching call this morning, and I'm reading this book right now called The 3 Laws of Performance. It's a great book, but it's all about how situations occur to you directly affect how you perform. And it's in this section of the book where it's talking about integrity. And so much of integrity is matching your word, like what comes out of your mouth, with what you do and who you are. And as you were saying earlier, integration is what matches from the inside to the outside.
Yeah.
And so I'm learning so much about the idea of what being fully integrated is. And it's when what I say matches exactly with what I do and who I am. And there's no differentiation. It's complete, fully integrated. And I say all that because this morning, as I was kind of reflecting and in conversation with him, I was just realizing, man, like I was comparing myself. I compare myself often, probably from being in a place of looking up, comparing up to what I should have or what I don't have yet. And it was creating so much of a sense of, even back to like the last topic that we talked about, which is forgiveness, but so much of a sense of unforgiveness for myself. Yeah. And I was like, okay, well, he was coaching me. He was like telling me like, well, come back to the vision. Like, who are you? Like, what do you want to be? And it was cool because I was able to kind of realign and kind of reconfigure myself and like what I was doing and what I was committing to and what my word was. But anyway, I want to come back to that and really just kind of dial in, like what tends to be the trigger for people in comparing, and then like how can you deal with it? Because that was a good process for me. But like, how do we actually start continuing the process of growing out of the comparison nature of ourselves?
Well, I think you just did an awesome job of describing, I think, part of the process, right? Is getting clear on what it is, who do you want to be?
Yeah.
What does it mean for you to be your authentic self? What is it that's important to you? I think the more that's the focus, I think it really is a powerful, I'm sure I could ask, for each of you, when you feel like you are in alignment, that you're acting out of integrity, that your actions are matching your words and your heart. I don't know. How do you guys feel? Do you feel secure? Do you feel confident? Do you feel, do you feel like that would be a good antidote to social comparison?
Yeah, so I believe you already touched on the solution. I mean, you hit it, and I think we should just point it out for everybody and for ourselves right here. The solution is to be focused on the truth, and it kind of brings me up to this this analogy that somebody shared with me one time. How do you spot an imposter, right? Well, he gave the guy's job is to stare at the dollar bills or the $100 bills getting printed off the printing press, and he's staring at the real thing all day. So anytime a counterfeit comes through, he spots it instantly.
Wow.
So the solution to this is to focus on what's true, to affirm that truth consistently, and passing that down onto our children as well. If we're so
really good,
so dialed in and basking in truth, then any falsehood coming by is just going to be immediately spotted and called out.
That's awesome.
I've heard the parallel analogy for that, for the kids, related to kids, is your sons or daughters who play with Legos, and there's all kinds of counterfeit Legos out there, or just off-brand Legos, and these boys are trained, man. They're SEAL Team 6. They can spot a counterfeit, and it's the same thing,
right? But what if you're in the opposite situation where you can't spot a truth because you're so stuck on that social media feed and just swallowing everybody's, whatever, vomit. I mean, pretty much, if you spend 30 minutes scrolling, you're like, wow, I just ingested everybody's crap for 30 minutes, right? And you're taking all that in. And most of it, social media just is a magnification of all this stuff too. Yep. And it just kind of brings it all to the surface in such a high level. Used to, right? When we were kids, I don't know, some of you are pretty young here, but we used to have to go to like a friend's house to see their like pictures and stuff and what they did last summer. Right? Like their picture book. Ben, you ever heard of one of those?
What is that?
Picture book. So now it's just like a live feed of what they ate for breakfast. I mean, this is like super heightened level of it, right? And so have you guys experienced recently at all where you've seen somebody's page, which is, oh my gosh, picture perfect, like, wow, they've got it together. This life is absolutely perfect. And then you go over to their house and like, it's chaos and they're just screaming at their kids and, the kids are acting out, but I thought your life was perfect.
Yeah. Dude, stop talking about the Applebee's real quick.
Oh my gosh.
I was just going to miss that. If I could just be like the Applebee's.
We're the Screaming Messy House. Didn't you get that connection there?
No, I guess not.
That pretends to be perfect.
Exactly.
And there's nothing wrong with the Screaming Messy House, but what's the challenge is the persona of perfection. How is that sustainable? That can't be good for them, and it's not good for those who are looking at it.
Yep. Well, how do you guys think that, in light of that, how does that affect like our parenting, and as men, as parents, as fathers, even in just general life, but like how does that affect us? And specifically, as we're talking about family, like as a parent, what could that do? I mean, in my mind, I'm immediately just going back to numerous, countless occasions where, because of some perceived desire or a perception of what I should have had, or a way that I should be parenting, or an expectation that I have on my kids because I see someone else's kids or someone else on social media as just perfect family, it immediately I'm like getting pissed off at my kids. Like, why aren't you just being perfect? We're supposed to be, this is the way everyone is, right? Like, we're all perfect. So I'm like, that energy is translating into my frustration towards my children who have no idea. As an example, that's just what came to mind. But how can that, how does this whole idea of like comparing ourselves and social comparison, how could it affect our parenting? It seems like it could be pretty drastic.
Yeah. I think, the concept of identity, your identity essentially sets your direction, right? When you have a clear identity, I think that's why I use the concept true north. You know what points towards, the things that motivate you, the goals you want to set, those things. Yeah. But you have identity for your family too, right? And I think the most important role I have as a father, I think we have as parents, is to help eliminate and reduce as much unnecessary ambiguity and uncertainty as we possibly can. So that means if I can help my kids so that they know exactly how I feel about them, right? They're not, questioning or second guessing that I love them and support them. If I can help them to know what's important to our family, right? Yeah. That there's a clear sense of what my expectations are of them. They know what gets reinforced. They know what gets course corrected.
That's good.
The more I can do that, it just eliminates kind of their need to guess, their need to try and figure it out. So it helps to create clarity for them. And they also know what's important. They know what their true north is, right? So
can you restate those three things that you said just before you started?
I'm not sure if I even remember what I just said.
It was like creating clarity, And then I can't remember.
Eliminating uncertainty.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And
Thank you.
ambiguity.
Yeah.
Perfect.
I wrote it down. I'm taking notes.
That's so good. Creating clarity, eliminating uncertainty and ambiguity.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So
I don't know if
good.
you guys realize Beto's over here. He's on the sticks. He's always helping control the mics here. But
thank you, Beto.
you're working hard. I know you got some
amazing.
wisdom to share with us here.
Yeah, baby. Well, no, it's so this is so good. What I'm thinking right now is that I kind of always tend to see how the Bible approaches psychology, because I feel like at the end of it all, when we study psychology, we're really studying who we are as humans, and I think the Bible has everything to say about who we are as humans. Wow. So, what do you think put Jesus on the cross? I think I was reading the Gospels at one point, and almost like from start to finish. I think it might have been the Message version, because it feels more like a story. So, anyways, I was reading it, and the word jealousy kept coming up again and again and again and again.
Wow.
And it almost seemed like, wow, Jesus was put on the cross because people were jealous that he was doing good when religiously he wasn't supposed to, right? On the Sabbath, on the healing people that he shouldn't have been healing. So when it comes to James, I was reading James. He's got like specific words about jealousy, and it says, James 4:2, you want what you don't have, so you scheme and kill to get it. Oh, wow. You are jealous of what others have, but you can't get it, so you fight and wage war to take it away from them. Yet you don't have what you want because you don't ask God for it. Right? So, wow. I mean, it's just like the things you really need, you need to ask God for. Wow. And he'll provide, and then you don't need to look to anybody else to fulfill those, right? So, yeah, I always tend to like just put, maybe I'm more like on the, I don't know if it sounds like religious or spiritual, but I don't want to be also like sound just like too spiritual, but I feel like
that's good.
Oh, that's what it means to me when I think of God and his work done on the cross, and what all that means is I can go to him and ask him for the things I need, and I don't need to compare myself to what others just do or don't have. And he's willing to give me what I need, right? Yeah. Which may not be what I think I need.
Dang, I love
or
that.
What I want.
I love that. Yeah. I don't want to say this is the to draw this comparison necessarily as the polar opposite, but you think of how, Jesus was crucified over jealousy, right? But what are we seeing happen on social media, and the credibility that's given to perhaps some of the least credible people, where they're being praised and even worshipped, the opposite, put on a pedestal.
Yeah, I love what Andy's saying about his family mission statement, really loosely, about you're really making a statement about attachment love. And so, you got Dallas Willard and Jim Wilder, who wrote this book called Renovated.
Oh, no, we have that book. We're reading it right now.
It's profound. It's an amazing roadmap for marrying the psychology and the theology that you're talking about.
Nice.
And I'm only halfway through, but my summary would be, they define chesed, which is this Hebrew mega concept in the Old Testament Bible. Faithful love or covenant love is what chesed means. And they're just exactly like you said, Beto. They're just attaching that Hebrew word to the psychology of attachment parenting or attachment love. You can think of attachment parenting or love as co-sleeping. So you got a newborn baby, and the newborn baby loves to lay next to mom or dad's body, right? Or you could take it there, and you could stretch that all the way to the prodigal son, right? Like the son is welcome. There's nothing that the son could ever do to get kicked out of that family system. Attachment love. And that's what you said. We erase clarity and ambiguity, ... His finished statement was about how loved they are. Yeah. So at the end of their day, they'll never, ever have it be a wash or a question or confusion about how loved they are. I think that's huge. And I think that fits in with my answer about, how do we mitigate it, or how do we help the next generation? And I think this is truly, because I didn't have any time to prep today, full admission, full
thanks for your honesty.
Confession mode. But I do think sometimes the Holy Spirit can work on the fly. And I'm not going to lie. I believe that what he just kind of revealed to me, even in this moment of listening to you guys, was the Shema. And so the Shema is this, Deuteronomy 6, Every good Jewish boy or girl would have had it memorized, maybe the whole chapter, not just the verse. But Deuteronomy 6:4 says, "Listen, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord alone." The Lord is one, is one of the translations. It's called the Shema. It's this, this memory verse, just for lack of a better description, a memory verse for every modern day and ancient Jewish child. And you guys know this, and maybe the listener does too. But back then, Jewish children and students would have had whole books of the first few books memorized, and then they get even more advanced as they were young adults or later teenagers. But what is the Shema? It's not religion. It's God's identity statement. It's actually God's emphatic identity statement. It's not religious norms. It's not even indoctrination, religious indoctrination. It's the chesed identity piece that everywhere you go, you're coming and going, you're sleeping and rising, you're on the way, repeat these things. And it's such a bummer, just being in a postmodern Western mind. You read decrees and commands, because that's what it says, write these decrees and commands on your heart. And we just read it so mechanically. It's like, oh, it's rules. Now you're talking religion. And God's like, no, this is exactly like you said, Beto. This is how I will relate to humanity, and this is how you're to relate to me. And the only way you're going to get it is if you focus on reality. You got to be focused on reality. Another wiser person said that the Bible is the ultimate reality. So if the Bible is really just channeling who Jesus is, it's the ultimate reality.
I'm taking notes, man. Yeah, I just love that stuff. And I do believe God wants us to affirm his truths, right? Write them on our heart. And so one of the things we do to tackle this and to keep our focus on truth is every single day we're affirming God's truth over our family and over our children. And that's how we're integrating it and passing it down to them and trying to surround them with it. And so they've got these things memorized, right? That, we can do all things through through Christ who gives us strength. Nothing can separate us from God's love. It's the cutest thing ever when they say, and are called according to his purposes, because we love God and are called according to his purposes, right? My little 6-year-olds.
That's awesome.
I mean, but so saying these things and writing these things down, right? God spoke the world into creation with words, and he gave us his written words. I mean, we're made in his image. There's got to be power behind words and writing.
That's good.
What's interesting, the word authenticity, right? The etymological root of it comes from the same concept as the word author, right? So this notion of both what is authored in us, right? But what are we authoring? What are the stories that we're carrying, that we're kind of telling forward? And I love, what you're saying with my kids every night. I go through some of the different identities of the terms that people use to describe God. So talk about Jehovah Jireh, right? Kind of God as provider. Abba, Father, right? We just kind of go through and break down because it gives us a sense of this is our relationship. This is what we can expect of God, right? And it's kind of fun. It's a good reminder for me as I'm saying it, reminding myself, my kids are kind of remembering, and then going through some of the terms used for Jesus and the Holy Spirit and understanding.
Can you think of any good resources for us or for parents out there to share with their children on these things?
I bet someone does, but I just wanted to affirm what Andy just said there about story. That was a key word that just jumped out. Narrative scripts, those things. That's what Shema is. That's what I was meaning to actually say. Is that it's a story. As that chapter continues. Ben, I've heard you talk about Shema and even Deuteronomy 6 many times. Yeah. One of the verses says, and when your kids ask, "What is this thing, Mom and Dad, that we're repeating?" You'll answer, you were slaves in Egypt, you were liberated from Egypt. It's a story. That's all it is. It's a story, but it's not, it's not just, Egypt isn't just this maybe kid's fairy tale. It ends up being the memorial, message of God's entire redemptive history is that you watch out in this world. You have the constant balancing act of slipping into captivity or choosing freedom and restoration. And so the story and narrative scripts become so critical for that. And I think kids have to know that, there's those suggestions are always going to be laid out for them. The suggestion of a comparison. Comparison is suggestion. It's just a teed up for, you can opt into this or what God says about you.
Yeah. Would you say there's any healthy comparison? Because when you're bringing up,
I want to talk about that.
Well, because you brought up, how the kids, they used to memorize all these scriptures by heart. Right. And you tell that to a kid today, I mean, they'd be like, are you nuts? But to compare, not to make them feel less than, but to show them what's possible.
I don't have a huge script on this, but I'm just glad I wanted to go there too, because this episode could just be the negative, side of comparison. You hit this, Andy, and I want to go hear from you and anyone else. But you also acknowledge the upside of it. Like if part of comparison is influence.
Yeah.
So actually, if there's people that you want to quote unquote use today's term like level up, and it's healthy, you're not demeaning yourself, and you're not tearing down your identity as an image bearer. Like that's the topic I want to hear more about. Like that people probably cover less because it's all evil, it's all demonized. But what about like influence that's
or even for our kids, like how can we get our kids to like have that level of influence?
The parable of the talents. I mean, we don't want to be the guy who buries his one talent. We want to be the guy with 10 talents that is given 10 more.
Yeah. So what is some of the psych on that, Andy?
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with the motivation in, what's driving the comparison, right? If it's trying to fill, kind of self-worth, it's a bad place to go. We use story all the time to motivate people, right? We tell a story of someone that overcame significant adversity. A lot of the family stories that we share are meant to inspire, right? That we've experienced, that we're not perfect, but, we're developing resilience as part of our identity. So I think understanding what am I using this comparison for, kind of going into it, is this, meant as me trying to draw upon other people's success so that I can kind of, relate this to, how can I personalize this, right? It's not about trying to do what they do. My grandpa was a hugely influential person in my life and was very successful in business. He had and people a lot of times will say when they, I don't know if my grandpa was Carl Karcher, so he started Carl's Jr., right.
Oh, no way. That's amazing. So cool.
Wow.
I didn't realize that.
And people often assume naturally through that, right? Oh, it must have been so difficult growing up in a shadoo, right? That he was so successful, he probably felt like he had to measure up. I never felt that. As my grandpa was so secure in who he was, right? When I was around him, I felt like I was the most important person in the room. And there's all kinds of stories, right? That I've been around people that are successful and their ego is massive, right? They're constantly trying to tell you how great they are and how wonderful they are. And it can make you feel insecure, right? But when you're around someone that feels secure in themselves, right? He spent most of his time asking me questions, trying to draw me out, and it made me feel like I could start to figure out what was authored in me.
Yeah. Wow. I'm so glad you came back to security, Andy, because Benny, I think truly that's one of the mega nuggets from this entire episode. Yeah. Because let me just paraphrase something you just said. You could be in a room, and our kids, all this applies to our kids, so we can drill really deep about just parenting, that's fine. But every human being of any age, you can be in a room with an egomaniac, right? Like and they could be as rich or as famous of whatever in the whole world. Yep. What if I assume, our mutual goal in this room is that our kids can sit in that room and just be like it was a blast and I loved it, and Dad, and I enjoyed it, and it was so killer, and look at all the stuff I learned. And nowhere in the report back to us, they say, I'm just like, but I'm wondering if God has a plan for me, and I walked away feeling really less than. And in other words, our hope is that our kids can just sit with anyone and walk away. I know they're just like, I just have this image, I can't put it into words, but like this happy-go-lucky kid that's just like, I know who I am before God. Like I know about my standing before God all day, every day. And so if I get to meet some crazy people along the way, cool. But I'm just neutral. Like I'm just stone cold, secure in my identity in Christ.
Yeah. I love that.
That's amazing.
I don't know if you're familiar, and again, I can't remember if we talked about this, but the psychology of uncertainty and kind of what uncertainty does to us, right?
No, we didn't really talk about that.
So our brain recognizes uncertainty as like fear or anxiety, right? So when we tend to experience it. Now, oddly, there actually is healthy uncertainty, right? There's anticipation of, whether it's a prize or something like that. But oftentimes it's really seen as a threat. And so then it tends to put us in kind of our amygdala, our primitive part of the brain, so that we're in a state of survival, right? We're essentially in our lizard brain. And so we're in a state of self-preservation, and that makes us, by definition, almost like very self-focused, right? So Absolutely. That we're thinking a lot of things are a threat when they're not. We're ready to, go on the attack, or we're kind of constricting and retreating within ourselves. So, and there's different forms of uncertainty, right? There's financial uncertainty, there's relationship uncertainty. And if you've experienced any of these, you know that they can be debilitating, right? It can just make you feel sick to your stomach, and it can consume you. It can kind of just really hijack your brain. But the research shows that the most debilitating form of uncertainty is probably one you guys have never heard of. We talked about it briefly earlier, but self-uncertainty. Because you can't escape yourself, right? You're constantly in your own head.
Wow.
And so the idea of when you feel self-uncertain, it feels so overwhelming. We feel this urge to try and resolve it. If we don't have the answers within, if we don't have the answers in the Bible, then we will naturally start to attach our identity to what we do, our income. And I think all that does, right? So let's say that our identity is attached to our income. And so we get, a huge sell and we start making a lot of money. It creates an extrinsic that we get a hit of dopamine when we get that. But what happens when the dopamine wears off? Because it doesn't last very long, right? It goes away and there's nothing to prop us up. And so guess what we need more of, right? We constantly need more and more, and that tends to lead to a lot of really, really toxic, unhealthy social comparison, and it puts us in a state that we are very insecure, right? And anything that gets in the way of us getting money or whatever that thing is going to see as a threat to our identity, and it's going to be reacted to very harshly. And so I think that's why resolving and being able to get, like what I experienced, I believe, with my grandpa, he was so clear on his values, right? He was such a principles-driven man. He knew what was important to him. And because of that, he felt secure. He kind of felt safe and trusted, right? He knew where his value came from God. He spent an hour in prayer every morning. He was in mass every day. And because of that, when you feel secure within yourself, it gets you out of the amygdala and allows you to operate in your prefrontal cortex. And that's where you can really, it's like you open up, where if self-preservation puts you in a state of contraction, where you're preserving and defending, being in a self-certain, secure place allows you to expand, and now you're able to be generous, right? Now you're outward focused. Wow. Like, how can I love? How can I bring generosity? Wow. How can I do those things?
Can you come and speak to my real estate team about that?
Yeah.
Let's go.
Yeah. It really powerful. Is. It's where you reach, kind of your full potential. I mean, I think it's obviously it's where God.
Would I love to hear about that? Because I mean, I'm studying abundance, and people are operating from a place of abundance and faith. And I mean, I know we've been jumping into a lot of Deuteronomy here, so I may have to introduce Deuteronomy 8 to us, but right, it's where God led the Israelites, right, for 40 years, and he fed them from manna from heaven, right, a food previously unknown, as he repeats to their ancestors. And it's just like our faithful provider, we're living in faithful abundance, right? And then when that he's the one who gives us the power to do these things, because of an agreement he made with our ancestors. And then when we come to this land of milk and honey and abundance, when we do arrive, that's the time to remember and obey. Remember that it was the Lord thy God and not our own hand that brought us this great wealth. But it's about that walk and that journey that God faithfully provided every morning. They woke up to that manna from heaven.
Yeah.
It's really so good. So I think what I'm hearing is, and maybe you guys can chime in, but just to kind of capture some of these things, because I feel like this is an episode that I'm going to have to go back and listen to about 10 times just to get all of it. But what I'm hearing is that so much of what resolves or helps us grow out of comparison, at least the unhealthy traits or side effects, is are we secure? And are we secure in who we are? And how do we get secure? We have to know who we are. And how do we know who we are? We have to know who God says we are. And that obviously you'll experience the shaking off of the habitual tendencies to compare through that process, which is a journey. But would there be anything else that you guys feel like you might want to include to kind of cap this conversation?
How do we pass that on to our children? Right, I think it's so relevant here, and you bringing that up. It's like, that has to be our ultimate goal.
Yeah.
And Ben, your description of your kids sitting in any room at neutral, how much I want that for my children. So
I think we've been answering it this whole time. And a lot of it has to do with security, in my opinion. One of the fundamental answers to comparison is really security. And Andy's helped us a ton, talking about attachment, talking about your view of yourself, and values, being values driven, and you guys have all affirmed that and said it in different ways. So I think if anyone poured over the episode again, they could find those outlined like 7 things that are really good. The last thing I saw from your notes, Ben, that I think is a worthwhile end cap, I don't know if I have the answer per se, but you did ask a question about comparison between parents. Parent-teen comparison. That's at least how I read it. And I think that's a really good one because, and again, we've touched on it because it often arises from social media, and we've talked about how you can feel okay as a parent is also an individual, so how you can feel okay about yourself as an individual. We've danced around it, but I'd love to hear anyone's input and concluding thoughts on that as well, because that's such a death trap. Like you hit it, George, talking about how they look perfect, and then you go over to their house and you get a more accurate view, kind of. But still, what would you guys say about between parents and family systems? Even we look at each other's mission statements with Legacymakers, and we're like, because it's very, at least when you're in a group setting, because they're always usually done in groups, you get to see people's final draft of their values and their mission and vision, and even then it can be like, oh, their mission vision sucks, why? Here's what I'll say, and then I'll this is not even profound, but it's profound what Andy said, and I heard this from Mike Erie as well about judgment. So he does this whole Bible study on, Jesus. Remember Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, do not judge lest ye be judged, and the same standard used. It's the Greek word krino. And he backs up before talking about good judgment and bad judgment, like how to discern some stuff is bad and you should judge it, and some stuff is good and we could embrace it. He backs up and someone helped him with the psychology, Andy, and they were like, why are we putting people down? And he said just what you said, because we're getting a dopamine hit. And I think that's probably step one. Like, it doesn't tell you exactly how to fix it, but it is an awareness level where it's like, I'm speaking to Ben Appleby now, like, why am I judging someone else's mission vision statement? Like, what am I getting? Maybe I'm getting a dopamine hit from it. And like, what's up with that? So I guess I would kick it first to Andy and then anyone else who wants to help parents between parents. But one thing you said already to answer it was like, it wears off, Ben, or listener. It's going to wear off. So am I led to deduce, if I filled in the ... it would be like, better find other healthy ways to stimulate that, that feeling, not like one drug for another drug, but, I think part of what you're saying even about your grandfather is like, you need to be fed, what do you think about that whole comparison, parents and dopamine?
Yeah. Love that. It was reminding me. So I think the pathway towards security really is just knowing your value, know what's important. And the more you reinforce that, the more you feel like you do daily things that just help you move towards it. The research is probably the healthiest way to develop self-worth and self-esteem, right? There's even some people who have said that self-worth, self-esteem should probably be reconceptualized as a values alignment, kind of experience. I think beyond that, where I think we find identity is a lot of times in our character strengths. You look at the story of Gideon, and I love that Gideon didn't see who it was that God was saying he was. And so the angel came down and she spoke and said, you are a man of valor, right? Spoke to his character. And when he accepted that, then that revealed his purpose and destiny. So love that. Wow. I think it's also important, you mentioned this earlier, about this idea of reality. And so I think sometimes, the ability to say, where am I at? What are my strengths? And you're comparing yourself hopefully to where you're at in the present and then the aspiration of where you're hoping to go. And having a growth mindset in that, right? That who you are today is not a fixed entity, right? It's a process. And so the more that you keep in front of you that, hey, I'm trying to grow my, courage, my gratitude, whatever those things are, and then having a plan for that. The research even around identity and personality says that, there's a lot of people that assume that who you are is kind of set. So, that you don't really change your personality, and that's nonsense, right? The research shows over a 5-year period, we change quite over a 10-year period. We can change, dramatically. Wow. But the people who change the most over that period of time in a way that's really gratifying and fulfilling, they have a clear self goal, right? They've developed almost a relationship with their future self. So they know where they're going, right? Instead of just kind of letting the winds blow them this way or that way.
I love that. And you look at examples in the Bible. I mean, it was often the ones that would be deemed unqualified were the ones that God chose, right? Yeah. And it was all of David's brothers that were brought forth and God rejected, but then said, he chose David, who was the least, physical of them all, right? And he said, you have all judged by their exterior, right? Comparison. But I look upon the heart, right? But then you mentioned another powerful word, gratitude, and this is actually something that I wrote down here that I'm just reading my notes. I wrote the comparison game is what the devil creates to make us ungrateful and unworthy of the gifts that God has given us.
The devil really used even that initial Adam and Eve, right, to come in and to disrupt, right, the relationship between, and kind of got them to start to want to have the knowledge of God, right? So get them to question who they were and to want more. And so I think I totally agree. I think the devil knows that if you can get someone to start to second guess their identity and their value, that's the easiest way to start to manipulate someone. You think about kids sometimes when, someone wants to get their friend to do something that might be foolish, they start to say, what are you, chicken? And so, I don't want to be seen as a chicken. Yeah. So you end up making choices that you probably are not in your best self-interest. Love the story of David just briefly too. I think part of the profoundness in that is that God, was developing certain strengths in David as a shepherd, right? That he had been learning how to perfect what rocks to pick, the sling and arrow. And then when he said he was going to fight Goliath, they initially tried to put him in a Roman soldier's outfit, right? If he tried to fight Goliath in that, I think he would have been slayed immediately. Right. But David knew who he was, right? And he trusted the gifts and the strengths that God had been building in him. And he understood, right, that in using those gifts, that's how he was going to slay Goliath. And I think that's important for all of us, whether this is with our kids, right? What are the what's unique to them, right? Not what are the expectations or what do I think? the other kids' neighbors, like what are the strengths that they have? How do I help them to find their unique gifts and help them to use those, right? And understand, what are the Goliaths that they can slay when they start to use the gifts that God is building within them.
Yeah, and a lot of David's writings in the Psalms, I mean, Psalm 23, for example, we've discussed before, was self-talk, self-hype, affirming God's promises to him, right? Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, right? Ooh. My cup overflows. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies, right? So if he was listening to any of the noise or comparing himself to all those soldiers out there, or, I need to wear that heavy armor that's going to weigh me down, he was so dialed in the truth and focused on that he was able to step into his true power and identity, right? His authentic self, and slay Goliath.
This will be my ending comment, Ben. And, this just to piggyback on what these two guys just said. It comes from some psych book. We can maybe post it to the show notes or something. But they talk about in this one book, they talk about the author, and he was an Olympic archer. And when he was training for archery and he'd hit bullseyes, he would self-talk. That's the principle. You said, Andy, and then you said, George. He'd say, "That's who I am."
Ooh. Wow.
Yeah, that's what you said, Andy, which is a sick comment. You need to have a conversation with your future self that you're becoming, who you are becoming. And that is so sick, and it's spiritual and psychologically, intimately psychological and spiritual. And that one really quick hack for the self-talk specifically is when you catch yourself acting good. I mean, just guys, someone's listening and they're, that's self-help. Just stop. You're just getting in your own way. Just stop with those stupid, rules that you picked up from someone that said that was bad.
Be like that.
Yeah, I know. We all did. It's like this self-imposed austerity. Like we can never bless ourselves or count our blessings or say it was a win or take credit even for a win or success even remotely, even though God gets the glory. Humility. Right. So you just be able to be comfortable. This is my last word to anyone listening. When you get a win and you see yourself performing or acting or speaking the way you're trying to the person you're supposed to become, just a simple script to say to yourself, because that's who I am. Or yes, that's who I am. Love that. And that is insane. Wow.
Anything from you, Beto, last minute?
Last minute, man. I don't know if I can do last minute, but there's just okay. I have a few ideas that popped up that I would probably just say this is my last thought. One is the idea as you're talking about the not your true north. Like true north could be faked into something that's not true north. So therefore, it's a false identity. And when immediately as you said, like your false identity, I feel like that's idol worship. And I was reading this book that said the main three idols the Western world is facing is power, money, and sex. So how do we assess what true north is if true north could be a negative or a false true north, right? And I was thinking, okay, how do we assess? So one thing that came to mind was Jesus was affirmed by the Father, right? So how can we, what you're saying, Greg, right? Like, George, how can we affirm our kids? Well, Jesus was affirmed by the Father. When he's baptized, he's affirmed, this is my son in whom I'm pleased, right? So affirm our kids. And then how can we help them differentiate between the true intentions and motives of their hearts? I think what's been helpful for me has been the difference between goodness and being right. And this is not my idea. I was reading a book by Erwin McManus, and he says, sometimes, if you don't know how to differentiate between being right and doing good, it's like good, it's always for others. And being right is usually about yourself. So when I was thinking that process, how can I identify like the true north? I feel like it's always other focused. It's focused on the other people. And the
That's
last
abundance.
thing, wow. So the last thing is, as I'm thinking of that, I'm like, wow, you were talking about the devil and maybe these lies that he puts in our mind. So isn't he a little bit like the AI algorithm? Like he learns what we like, he learns how we're going to respond to things, and then he asks the question, right? So imagine Jesus' temptation, which, by the way, comes right after he's been affirmed by the Father and baptized. And then he goes through the temptations, right? And the temptations, It's basically tempting the affirmation that he just received. And the temptations, if you realize, I mean, Jesus responds back with the word, with scripture, and then the devil's like, okay, he learned the algorithm and then responds with scripture, right? So at that point is the difference between goodness and being right, because now you're being tempted with scripture, right? So how do you differentiate between what seems right and what is good? And it's other focus. Like if you can get the sense of like, is this helping myself only, or is this helping somebody else? So if we help our kids see the bigger picture and it's not all about you, right? I think that's what it comes down to when I think of how do I pass it on to my kids.
So good. Man,
pretty good. Beto's
always coming in with the bombs at the end.
Yeah.
Man.
So nourishing.
This is going to
just close my eyes and listen to him.
Yeah. Right. So good, Beto. Oh, man. Well, make sure you guys go back and listen to this episode. I'm going to have to put it on like half speed because there's so many good things in this show right now. Just so thankful for you guys' input and you sharing and all just the valuable nuggets and gold mine of just information and powerful tools and ways of thinking that everybody needs to equip themselves with. And so I'm excited to release this show and get it out there. So thank you all so much, and thank you everybody who listened. We hope you enjoyed the show. We'll see you next time. At Legacymakers, we are igniting a movement of families living on purpose so that every generation should set their hope anew on God. And you choosing to listen to this episode today is only going to further that movement and further the development of the legacy you will leave for generations. So thank you for being a part of that. If you'd like to learn more about becoming a legacy maker, go to www.chooseourlegacy.com, where you're going to find resources and tips and next steps to continue building the legacy that you intend to leave. You can also follow us on all social platforms at Legacy Maker Families. Thank you so much again for listening, and now go love your family.